Pirates slept comfortably through brutal Atlantic storms while you can't even sleep without your heated blanket. Their secret method kept them warm in freezing rain for months at sea, and it has nothing to do with what you'd expect. Ever wonder where pirates caught their beauty sleep when Mother Nature decided to throw a tantrum? Well, forget everything you've seen in those Hollywood movies with pirates sleeping on deck under the stars like they're at some medieval camping retreat. The reality was far more practical. Pirates slept in hammocks strung between wooden beams down in the ship's hold. That's the belly of the ship, below deck where the weather couldn't reach them. Smart, right? These weren't your backyard barbecue hammocks either. We're talking about heavy-duty canvas contraptions that could handle a 200-pound sailor swaying like a pendulum in rough seas. Here's the clever part that would make any modern space-saving enthusiast jealous. Hammocks moved with the ship's motion instead of fighting against it. While landlubbers would be tossed around like salad in a bowl, pirates in hammocks rode the waves like they were being rocked to sleep by an oversized wooden cradle. The ship rolls left, your hammock swings left, ship tilts right. You follow along for the ride. But wait, there's more to this floating bedroom situation. A single pirate ship could pack in over 100 hammocks down there, lined up like sardines in a can. During the day, these hammocks folded up and disappeared faster than your motivation on Monday morning. This gave the crew space to work, eat, and probably argue about whose turn it was to swab the deck. The real genius was getting off the ground, or, in this case, off the ship's floor. That wooden deck below was constantly cold, wet, and about as comfortable as sleeping on a park bench in winter. Hammocks kept pirates elevated above the dampness that seeped through every crack and crevice of the ship. Think of it like an early version of those fancy moisture-wicking mattresses, except it was just common sense wrapped in canvas. These hammocks also created a cocoon effect, trapping body heat around the sleeper. Not exactly a down comforter, but when you're dealing with freezing rain and no central heating, every degree counts. The snug fit meant less surface area exposed to the cold air circulating through the hold. Of course, staying dry was only half the battle when you're essentially living inside a wooden bathtub during a storm. The question becomes, how did they keep that precious sleeping space from turning into an indoor swimming pool? Now, here's where things get interesting. Despite what Hollywood wants you to believe, pirate ships leaked like a grandpa's dentures at a corn-eating contest. These weren't luxury cruise ships with watertight compartments. They were floating wooden buckets, held together by hope and hemp rope. Pirates knew their ships would take on water, so they got creative. They stuffed oakum, basically old rope fibers, into every crack and gap they could find, then slathered tar over everything. Think of it like using duct tape and prayers to fix a leaky roof, except your roof is floating in the middle of an angry ocean. The smell must have been absolutely delightful. But here's the clever part. When storms hit, pirates didn't just sit there getting soaked like wet cats. They'd stretch tarpaulins over deck openings, creating makeshift rain shields that redirected water away from their sleeping quarters. These weren't fancy waterproof tarps either, just heavy canvas that worked about as well as you'd expect. The phrase, batten down the hatches, actually comes from this era. Pirates would secure wooden boards over openings to keep the worst weather out. Makes sense, right? Though I suspect modern office workers use this phrase more than actual sailors these days. Well, here's something that might surprise you. Pirates weren't completely miserable when stuck below deck. They'd huddle together and share stories, sing songs, or complain about the captain's questionable navigation skills. It was like an early version of a support group, except with more cursing and fewer comfortable chairs. Then there's the wool blanket situation. Pirates loved woolen blankets because wool stays warm even when wet, a neat trick of nature that saved countless lives. Your grandmother's itchy wool sweater suddenly doesn't seem so bad when you realize it could keep you alive in a freezing rainstorm at sea. And the weird part is, despite all these precautions, ships still flooded regularly. Pirates spent half their time bailing water with buckets, which was about as fun as it sounds. But this constant battle against the elements created something unexpected, an incredible sense of teamwork. Speaking of teamwork, staying warm required more than just staying dry. Pirates had to master the art of layering clothing, and their approach to fighting off hypothermia was surprisingly sophisticated for a bunch of supposedly lawless rogues. When you think about staying warm without a thermostat, pirates had it figured out better than most college students today. Their secret weapon, layers upon layers of whatever they could get their hands on. Woolen jackets were worth their weight in gold. Literally. Pirates would fight over a good wool coat because it kept them warm even when soaked through. Unlike your favorite cotton hoodie that becomes useless the moment it gets wet, wool maintains its insulating properties. Smart, right? But here's where it gets interesting. Those iconic bandanas weren't just fashion statements or intimidation tactics. Pirates wrapped their heads like they were preparing for the world's dampest Winter Olympics. Heat escapes through your head faster than gossip spreads through a retirement home, so covering up was essential survival strategy. The layering method pirates used would make modern outdoor enthusiasts jealous. They'd start with whatever undergarments they had, often just their regular clothes, then add shirts, vests, jackets, and finally oilskins or makeshift wind barriers. Think of it as the original puffer jacket, except made from 15 different items stolen from 15 different ships. Well, body heat sharing wasn't exactly optional either. Pirates huddled together during the coldest nights like penguins in a nature documentary. Personal space was a luxury they couldn't afford when hypothermia was knocking at the door. Makes your awkward family gatherings seem pretty comfortable by comparison. Then there's the surprising truth about pirate clothing. Hollywood shows them in rags, but practical pirates maintained their gear better than most people maintain their cars today. Torn clothing meant cold clothing, and cold clothing meant dead pirates. Simple math. The really clever ones crafted wind cloaks from old sailcloth. These weren't exactly haute couture, but they blocked the wind like nobody's business. When you're standing watch on deck at 3 in the morning with freezing rain pelting your face, fashion takes a back seat to function. And the weird part is, pirates often slept fully clothed. Stripping down for bed was another modern luxury they couldn't afford. Their hammocks became cocoons of layered fabric and shared warmth. Some captains even rotated clothing duties, ensuring the driest garments went to whoever needed them most. Democratic hypothermia prevention. Who knew pirates were so progressive? But staying warm was only half the battle. The real challenge came from the relentless dampness that seemed to seep into everything. When the rain kept pounding and the wind wouldn't quit, pirates had to get creative about staying functional. These weren't weekend sailors complaining about getting their yacht shoes wet. They were dealing with conditions that would make modern sailors call for a helicopter rescue. The smart crews worked in shifts during heavy weather. Half the men stayed below deck, keeping their clothes dry and their bodies warm. The other half took the brutal duty topside, but only for short stretches. Think of it like a really wet, dangerous game of musical chairs where nobody wanted the music to stop. Now here's something clever your grandfather would appreciate. Those old ships had built-in drainage systems called scuppers, basically fancy holes cut into the sides of the deck. Water would flow right through them and back into the ocean where it belonged. No fancy pumps or electric systems needed, just good old-fashioned gravity doing the heavy lifting. But wait, there's more to this water story. Pirates weren't just trying to get rid of rainwater, they were collecting it too. Fresh water was more valuable than rum sometimes. Well, almost as valuable as rum. They'd set up canvas funnels and fill every barrel they could find. Nothing like a good storm to top off the water supplies for free. The constant battle cry on any pirate ship was keep it dry. A wet ship was like a ticking time bomb. Waterlogged wood became heavy wood, and heavy ships moved like your uncle trying to dance at a wedding, awkward and likely to tip over. Every pirate knew that moisture was the enemy of everything from gunpowder to their last clean shirt. Wooden barrels were treated like gold during storms. These containers held everything important: food, water, weapons, and sometimes the crew's most treasured possessions. Pirates would scramble to move barrels away from leaks, wrapping them in whatever waterproof materials they could find. A soggy barrel of hardtack was bad enough, but wet gunpowder? That meant the difference between winning a fight and becoming fish food. The tools they used were simple but effective. Sponges, rags, and primitive mops made from rope became weapons in their war against dampness. Every crew member carried something to soak up water. It was as essential as carrying a knife. And speaking of essential equipment, let's talk about what really kept these sailors alive when the weather turned deadly. Nobody talks about this, but pirates were basically running the world's first floating therapy groups. When you're trapped on a wooden box in the middle of nowhere with freezing rain hammering down, keeping everyone's spirits up wasn't just nice, it was survival. Sea shanties weren't entertainment. They were psychological warfare against despair. These weren't your modern karaoke nights either. Picture grown men belting out, "What shall we do with a drunken sailor?" at 2 in the morning while water dripped through every crack. The rhythm helped coordinate work, but more importantly, it reminded everyone they weren't alone in their misery. Card games became sacred rituals during storms. Pirates would huddle around makeshift tables, playing with cards so worn you could barely see the suits. Gambling their meager possessions might sound stupid, but it gave them something to think about besides hypothermia. One pirate's torn shirt today could be another's lucky charm tomorrow. Then there's the storytelling. Every crew had that one guy who could spin yarns for hours, usually complete nonsense about mermaids or treasure islands, but it worked. These stories transported minds away from numb fingers and chattering teeth. Think of it as Netflix, but with more scurvy and fewer bathroom breaks. But here's where it gets interesting. Alcohol wasn't just for getting drunk. Rum served triple duty as liquid courage, internal heating system, and social glue. A tot of rum before sleep helped blood circulation and made those damp hammocks feel almost cozy. Well, cozy might be stretching it. The real genius was in pirate democracy. Unlike Navy ships where officers got the best quarters, pirate captains often shared the same miserable conditions as their crews. Nothing builds solidarity like watching your boss shiver just as much as you do. This wasn't charity, it was smart leadership. Happy pirates don't mutiny. Captain rotations meant everyone got breaks from the worst duties. Standing watch in freezing rain for 4 hours straight could break anyone's spirit. But knowing your relief was coming, and that tomorrow someone else would take the worst shift, that made all the difference. Makes sense, right? When you can't escape the cold, you escape into each other's company. However, all the singing and storytelling in the world couldn't solve one fundamental problem that plagued every pirate ship. Ship stability wasn't something pirates learned from textbooks. It was literally a matter of life or death. And here's where things get interesting. Those hammocks swaying below deck weren't just for comfort. They were accidentally brilliant engineering. When 100 pirates hung their hammocks in the hold, they created what modern naval architects call movable ballast. As the ship rolled, the weight shifted naturally with the motion. Genius? Well, more like drunk luck that happened to work. But the real science came with the bilge pumps. Picture this. You're trying to sleep while freezing rain pounds the deck above, and every few hours someone yells, "All hands to the pumps." Because if they didn't pump out the water collecting in the ship's bottom, they'd wake up as fish food. Those hand-operated pumps were basically medieval gym equipment. 2 pirates working a pump could move about 50 gallons per minute, assuming they weren't too seasick to stand. Makes your morning workout seem pretty cushy, doesn't it? Then there's ballast, the heavy stuff pirates packed low in the ship to keep it stable. Stones, sand, even captured treasure chests served this purpose. Smart captains knew exactly how much weight to carry. Too little, and the ship would tip over like a drunk sailor. Too much, and they'd sit so low that every wave washed over the deck. Navigation during storms required reading the elements like a weather app. Pirates watched cloud formations, felt wind direction changes, and measured wave patterns. They had to know when a storm was coming because, and here's the kicker, even the most bloodthirsty pirates would run from bad weather. Blackbeard himself once abandoned a potential prize because storm clouds looked threatening. Turns out Mother Nature was scarier than any naval fleet. Ship maintenance became obsessive during rough weather. Pirates constantly checked for loose boards, retard seams, and reinforced weak spots. A single loose plank could mean disaster when waves started pounding. They'd work in shifts, hammering and patching, even while rain soaked them to the bone. The weight distribution had to be perfect. Too many pirates on one side during a storm could actually capsize the ship. Experienced captains would literally count heads and redistribute crew members like human cargo. Well, all this stability work meant nothing if the ship took on too much water. Which brings us to the real battle, fighting the constant threat of sinking when every storm tried to send them to Davy Jones's locker. When freezing rain hit a pirate ship, the deck became a death trap. Picture an ice rink, but one that's rocking back and forth while you're trying to work with heavy ropes and sharp cutlasses. Yeah, not exactly the fun kind of skating. Pirates literally slipped and slid their way through daily tasks. Broken bones were common. Some poor souls went overboard when their feet betrayed them on the icy planks. The smart ones learned to shuffle like penguins, less dignified than the movies show. But hey, dignity doesn't keep you alive. But here's the thing about freezing rain that really sucked. It didn't just make walking dangerous. The ice formed on the rigging, adding massive weight to the sails and ropes. Ships could actually tip over from all that extra frozen baggage. Like your grandmother's purse, looks harmless until you try to lift it. Then there's frostbite. Pirates weren't exactly known for their manicures, but losing fingers and toes to the cold was a serious occupational hazard. They'd huddle around whatever heat sources they could find, which usually meant getting uncomfortably close to their smelly shipmates. Well, the irony is that exposure to these brutal conditions actually made the survivors tougher. Those who didn't die became practically immune to normal cold weather, natural selection at work, maritime style. The weak went home or went overboard. The strong became legendary. Makes sense, right? These weren't weekend warriors playing dress-up. They were people hardened by conditions that would send most of us running back to our heated homes faster than you could say central heating. Some pirates got creative with warmth. Blackbeard, that crazy fool, actually lit hemp fuses under his hat during battles. Sure, it looked terrifying to enemies, but it also kept his head warm. Talk about multitasking. Intimidation and insulation rolled into one smoky package. And the weird part is how these miserable conditions brought crews together. Shared suffering has a way of bonding people. When you're all equally cold, wet, and miserable, class distinctions tend to disappear pretty quickly. The constant battle against hypothermia meant pirates developed an unspoken code of looking out for each other. Because tomorrow, you might be the one too cold to function properly. Of course, all this struggling against the elements was pointless if the ship itself couldn't handle the water. And that's where things got really interesting. Because keeping a wooden vessel afloat in a storm required some seriously clever tricks. Water rushing into a pirate ship wasn't just an inconvenience. It was a death sentence waiting to happen. Every drop that made it past the deck meant more weight dragging the vessel closer to Davy Jones's locker. Pirates knew this better than anyone, which is why they treated water like an unwelcome dinner guest who overstayed their welcome. Buckets became lifelines during heavy downpours. Crews formed human chains, passing wooden pails from hand to hand faster than gossip spreads at a church social. The rhythmic splash and dump became second nature. One pirate would bail while another steered, creating a delicate dance that kept everyone breathing above water rather than below it. But here's where ship design got clever. Those old shipwrights weren't just hammering planks together randomly. They built decks with something called camber. Basically, a subtle peak running down the middle. Water hit the deck and immediately started rolling toward the edges like a bowling ball on a tilted lane. Smart, right? The real magic happened at the ship's sides. Scuppers, essentially fancy holes with covers, acted like nature's own drainage system. Rainwater would collect, hit these openings, and whoosh straight back to the ocean where it belonged. Think of them as the great-great-grandfather of your bathroom drain, except failure meant everyone died instead of just dealing with a messy floor. When things got truly desperate, pirates made brutal choices. Heavy cargo went overboard first. Then came the spare planks, barrels, even furniture. Anything that wasn't nailed down became fish food if it meant keeping the ship afloat. I've always wondered how many treasure chests are sitting on ocean floors simply because some crew chose survival over riches. The coordination required was absolutely incredible. Picture trying to organize a bucket brigade while the ship pitched like a mechanical bull, rain pelted your face, and everyone's hands were numb from cold. Yet somehow these crews managed it, hour after grueling hour. Leadership during these moments separated real captains from pretenders. A good captain didn't just bark orders. They grabbed a bucket themselves. They'd position the strongest crew members at crucial points and rotate tired sailors before exhaustion set in. Because when you're fighting the ocean itself, everyone's survival depends on everyone else pulling their weight. This constant battle against the elements explains why pirates develop such fierce loyalty to their crews. When you've spent countless nights bailing water together, watching each other's backs against nature's worst tantrums, you form bonds stronger than any treasure could buy.